I'm Jason Epperson. This is Parkography, and it's time for the latest in national park and public lands news. First up, as of this recording, Tuesday afternoon, September 30th, the federal government is looking like it will shut down tonight at 12:01 a.m. So I'm going to share what we know about what will happen at national parks and other federal lands so that you can plan your travels and visits. If a shutdown does not happen or is over by the time you see this episode, you can just use the chapter markers to skip ahead to the next story. Most of the federal departments have made their shutdown plans public at this point. Unfortunately, that does not include the Interior Department, which handles most of the federal land agencies, including the National Park Service and the Bureau of Land Management. The Department of Agriculture, which handles the U.S. Forest Service, also has not released its plans. There is currently a plan for the National Park Service on the books, but it was developed during the Biden administration and will most likely not be followed. But we can go off past history. Presidents have wide discretion to declare how a shutdown will be handled and what would be closed. Many remember that under the Obama administration, a shutdown closed virtually all federal lands to public access. In contrast, during the last shutdown, during the first Trump administration, which lasted 35 days in December of 2018 and January of 2019, parks remained open to the public while 80% of the National Park Service staff was furloughed. Government Executive is reporting that about 50% of Interior Department is expected to be furloughed this time around and only about a quarter of the Department of Agriculture. But which of those sub-agencies like the National Park Service and the Forest Service are reduced by what is anyone's guess at this moment. Regardless, starting Wednesday, services in parks will begin to be reduced. Some facilities may run on current funding temporarily and then gradually have to furlough more staff and shut down more facilities. Reservations at campgrounds will likely be canceled and buildings will be locked, but you will likely be able to enter most National Park Service sites and even stay at those campgrounds with little to no services, including potentially no trash pickup and limited restroom access. If any, restrooms might not be cleaned. There will be no fee collection likely, be sort of an honor system. Anywhere that normally closes during certain hours, like for instance, Gettysburg is closed overnight, that stuff will likely not be accessible. You won't be able to get into Carlsbad Caverns, stuff like that. States can foot the bill to keep their national park sites open. Arizona, Colorado, and Utah committed to keeping national parks within their borders open ahead of the funding deadline in 2023, but a shutdown was ultimately avoided. So far, Utah is the only state that has committed to keeping its parks open during this shutdown. The 2018-2019 shutdown resulted in piling up of trash and sporadic instances of graffiti and damage, but even though it was the longest shutdown on record, its effects on parks could have been far worse had it happened in the busy tourism season. This shutdown is sort of on the tail end of heavy tourism for many parks, but this is still a very popular time for others. National parks typically receive around 10 million visitors in October and less than half of that in December and January. Some nonprofit watchdog agencies are concerned about potential damage to parks. The National Parks Conservation Association says that during the last shutdown, prehistoric petroglyphs were vandalized and irreparably damaged at Big Bend National Park. Joshua trees were chopped down at Joshua Tree National Park, and at Death Valley National Park, campgrounds were kept open, but restrooms were closed, leading to sanitation issues. Death Valley also had illegal off-roading vehicles drive through fragile archaeological sites, and at Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks, human waste and trash issues became so problematic that the parks were eventually forced to close. Over 40 retired park superintendents co-signed a letter to Interior Secretary Doug Burgum urging parks to stay closed during a shutdown, saying in part, "Dear Secretary Burgum, as former superintendents of national parks across the country, we write you with an urgent appeal to protect our parks and public lands by closing them if a government shutdown occurs. Past shutdowns in which gates remained open with limited staff have hurt our parks, iconic symbols cut down and vandalized, trash piled up, habitats destroyed, and visitor safety jeopardized. If you don't act now, history is not just doomed to repeat itself, the damage could in fact be much worse. This summer, our parks were pushed to the brink by budget cuts and staff reductions. A recent New York Times report found that at least 90 parks are already facing serious strain in an effort to comply with the directive in Secretary Order 3426 that parks remain open and accessible to the public despite huge reductions in the workforce. If national parks are to be open to visitors when national park employees are furloughed, these nascent issues from the summer season are sure to erupt, leaving parks even partially open to the public during a shutdown with minimal or no park staffing is reckless and puts both visitors and park resources at risk. As stewards of these American treasures, we urge you to prioritize both conservation and visitor safety and protect our national parks during a potential shutdown and into the future. If sufficient staff aren't there, visitors shouldn't be either. I'll certainly be following up on the effects and closures during the shutdown if it does indeed occur.
More in a moment, but first, this episode is sponsored by Slinky Stove. Slinky Stove is the patented collapsible fire pit that stays intact when packed. It's perfect for RVs and car camping or in your own backyard. It sets up in seconds, providing you with smokeless airflow rings and a clean burning fire. No more dancing around campfire smoke. Inexpensive and packed with extras, the Slinky Stove offers a 3-level cooking system that gives you flexibility, whether it's morning coffee or evening campfire chili. And with contained ash, cleanup's quick, just the way it should be on public lands. Order yours now at slinkystove.com or click the link in the description.
Moving on to other stories around the park system, beginning October 1st, Grand Canyon National Park will partially reopen select areas of the North Rim to public access following the Dragon Bravo fire that burned down a lodge and other infrastructure. The partial reopening will include Highway 67 to the W1 Road, approximately at mile marker 11, and the Cape Royal Road, providing access to both Point Imperial and Cape Royal. Additionally, Fire Point and Swamp Ridge will reopen. These areas will be open daily from sunrise to sunset. No overnight use is permitted on the North Rim, with the exception of Swamp Point and Fire Point. Open areas will remain accessible through November 30th or until the first major snowfall, whichever occurs first. Quote, reopening portions of the North Rim allows visitors to once again experience some of the park's most scenic areas while we continue to assess post-fire impacts and begin recovery efforts, said Grand Canyon National Park Superintendent Ed Keeble. This is the first of several phased reopenings planned for the North Rim, and we appreciate the public's patience as we work diligently to restore access. All other areas of the North Rim remain closed for the foreseeable future due to safety concerns and ongoing recovery efforts related to impacts from the fire. Visitors are advised to use caution when traveling to the reopened areas. Hazards remain, including dead standing trees, the potential for flash flooding even in areas not directly affected by the fire, and the presence of crews and equipment actively working on recovery operations. Due to the remote nature of the North Rim, visitors should be fully self-sufficient and bring food, water, and supplies. There's no power, running water, cell service, or visitor services currently available in the reopened areas. Fuel is also not available, so visitors should plan ahead and ensure they have sufficient fuel before entering the North Rim area. Emergency response will be extremely limited, and response times may be significantly delayed. Staff at Gettysburg National Military Park report that one of the capstones of the South Confederate Avenue Bridge over Plum Run, best known as Dinosaur Bridge, that contains a dinosaur fossil, was vandalized on Thursday, September 25th. Park maintenance staff discovered a large capstone missing from the bridge. They soon found it below the bridge along Plum Run. Evidence suggests a heavy object was used to strike the stone and pry it free, causing it to fall. The fossil, an Ankylosaurus track, a dinosaur that lived during the Jurassic period, 201 million years ago, was unharmed and is now safely in park custody while the investigation is ongoing. If you have any information, you can contact the park and they'd be happy to hear it. The fungus that causes white nose syndrome in bats has been detected in Oregon for the first time. White nose syndrome is an infection in bats that disrupts hibernation, causing dehydration and starvation. Samples analyzed by the U.S. Geological Survey confirmed the presence of the fungus in guano collected from a bat roost at Lewis and Clark National Historical Park. The fungus was also found in 3 bats at San Juan Island National Historical Park in Washington state. It's the first documented case of the fungus in San Juan County, Washington. White nose syndrome has killed millions of bats in North America since its detection in New York in 2007, and it continues to spread. At least 40 states have detected the disease, and 5 others have detected the fungus without the disease. The fungus spreads primarily through bat-to-bat contact during hibernation. White nose syndrome does not cause illness in humans, but it can be spread by contaminated clothing, gear, and equipment after visiting in or near caves. The Department of the Interior has announced the opening of 13.1 million acres of federal land for coal leasing, tripling the benchmarks set by the One Big Beautiful Bill Act passed earlier this year. The Bureau of Land Management is making the land available and lowering royalty rates to 7% for projects in Montana, Wyoming, Tennessee, and North Dakota. And finally, the National Park Service is looking for new concessionaires at several locations. Grand Teton National Park is accepting proposals for a 15-year business opportunity in Grand Teton to provide lodging, campgrounds, food and beverage, and other visitor services. Over its life, the contract is anticipated to bring in over $1 billion in gross revenue and serve more than 50 million visitors. The chosen concessionaire will provide lodging, food and beverage services, retail, marina operations, campgrounds, guided horseback rides, and guided float trips throughout the park. The contract also requires upgrades such as improved employee housing and fire protection, expanded food and beverage options, and maintenance of over 400 buildings, a significant portion of which are historic and require specialized care. One building, the Jackson Lake Lodge, is designated as a National Historic Landmark. The current operator, Grand Teton Lodge Company, will continue to provide services while the solicitation process is underway. Voyageurs National Park is looking for an operator for lodging, retail, food and beverage, guest transportation, and marina services. And Hot Springs National Park is looking for a concessionaire to provide traditional bathhouse and massage therapy services at its historic baths. That's it for this National Park and Public Lands News Roundup. If you got something out of this episode, hit the like button, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.